Yeah, I think we're ready. I'll just quickly say for everyone still on the call. Damon's going to lead the session today. Obviously, he's founder and CEO of Pure Cyber, which is one of our ACCA partners. Um, it's a bit more of an informal kind of like interactive session. So if you have any questions or want to kind of say anything, you can use the chat or you can use the little raise your hand function at the top of the screen, and we'll know that you want to come in and ask a question or say something. But yeah, I think that's everything. We've not got very long. So Damon, I'll pass over to you.
Thanks, Sophie. If you can as well, Sophie, if someone does raise their hand or something, can you let me know, because I can't see it because I'm sharing my screen and all I can see is my presentation. I'm
Yep,
just
I'll let you
staring
know.
at the screen. Yeah, fantastic. Appreciate that. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. As Sophie said, my name's Dave. I don't need to say anything else, and I'm the CEO and founder of Pure Cyber, and this is Cyber Risk. So we might as well get straight into it, I suppose. So, as Rachel was talking about, as we know, there's we reduced the risk culture. Well, the ACCA produced the risk culture report very recently, and I'm sure you've all read it. And one of the key takeaways, especially around cyber risk, is that technology, data, and cybersecurity risks are ranked as the second top risk priority overall. And in North America, it was ranked as the #1. So there would have been a time if we were having a conversation about cybersecurity 2-3 years ago, even so not that long ago, really, I would still spend most of the time explaining what cybersecurity is and cybercrime is, and really why it's a problem and why businesses need to understand that. But gone are those days. Thankfully, there is a common terminology that everybody sort of understands, and really everybody sort of realizes it. And it's probably one of the most pertinent quotes in the report, and one that sort of set the direction of this breakout session, is that the cybersecurity is one of the biggest problems for the best of us, and we don't know how to, and this is probably the key, I suppose, collectively manage or report on it. So I think if I'm gonna spend a little bit of time talking about it. Some might think some of the things I say is a little bit controversial, so feel free to have a conversation about it. That's no problem at all. So I'll start off with #1 controversy that loads of people seem to always get really annoyed with me about, is that cybersecurity is not an IT issue. And quite simply, it isn't. So for a number of reasons, really. So really, IT compounds the issue, right? The more technology that we use, the more risk of cyber risk. If we were all still using pens and paper, then cyber criminals are really able to infiltrate anything. So the more IT and the more technology we use, the more risk of something going wrong. And obviously, so the reasons why cyber is not an IT issue and shouldn't be left on the doorstep of IT. And I think the reason I'm talking about this as well is we see so many organizations realize they've got to do something about cybersecurity, but they turn to their IT team, whether that's an internal organized part of the company, or more often than not, for most organizations, an external body. And they expect them to have all the answers and be able to fix it. And they're not. They are designed to keep your systems up and running. And I'll tell you now, 90% of MSPs and IT departments and other organizations think in products. They think in solutions. And cybersecurity is not a product, it's a process. And understanding things, understanding is key. And Claire mentioned earlier, just now in the talk, I wasn't going to say about magic fairy wands. First time I've ever used that word used in a presentation, which is great. But no, empowering people. And hopefully what we talk about is all about empowering people. So to start, #1 reason why cyber is not an IT issue is a human factor. And on many sides, right, humans do things wrong, whether it's clicking and answering phishing emails, using weak passwords, putting sensitive data in the wrong place, but also configuring IT. IT people, shock horror, do things wrong. And quite often it's not out of ignorance or anything like, it's purely speed. And we've spoken to so many companies that have trouble with their IT provider, but it's quite often the IT providers who want to do things properly. And if you ever ask, I don't know, someone in charge of the IT within an organization, do you want the systems fixed quickly so everybody can be back up and running, or do you want them fixed properly? But that might take a couple of hours longer and everybody will be twiddling their thumbs. Everybody who's honest will say, no, we want the solution to it done as quickly so systems can be back up and running as quickly as possible without, and then we'll come back and fix the security issues around that later. Happens all the time. So human factor is a huge problem. Business impact, the actual impact of cybercrime or the risk of, damaging the business goes way beyond IT, way beyond, and strategic decisions as well. How secure do you want your systems to be as an organization? If you imagine a line with being really super secure on the left, all the way to a little completely unsecure on the right. Imagine a slider. The more secure you become, the less usable your systems become. And the more unsecure you become, or usable they become, the more unsecure they become. So that balance is really important between usability and secure. And again, that's a decision for company owners and department owners to make. Regulatory compliance goes way beyond IT as well. Again, if you see IT as just a tool to meet regulatory compliance, and everything else in between. And integrated systems. There's so much of the systems that we use today go outside of your own control and your IT systems. So, that's a really important one as well. So nothing too major with this really, but it is just to understand that we need more and more organizations and more businesses to understand that you can't throw cybersecurity onto the doorstep of the IT guys and expect it to be resolved and a solution to be made. It's a much bigger process than that. So how do you build cyber resilience? I suppose that's a nice one to talk about. Well, and I know the guys mentioned, and as I said, Claire mentioned empowerment. And this is probably your number one way to empower what you do as an organization, whether you're a small organization, whether you're a department head, or whether you're a multi organization that's all over the world. These key principles, right? What data do you have? You'll be amazed to the amount of businesses that we work with that don't even understand what data they have. The next thing to ask is, where is it? Again, you would be absolutely amazed. So we worked with an organization and I was asked to run a cyber audit for them. So the team, we ran the exercise. Unfortunately, I was the one who had to deliver all the information as well. They recently, before they engaged with us, they'd spent a lot of money on building a disaster recovery environment. So a site away from their head office that in the event of everything went catastrophically wrong at that office, they would be able to log in and carry on. Fantastic. And the principle of that, there's no problem with that at all. But unfortunately for them, they didn't know what data they had. And even more importantly, they didn't know where the data was. And if they'd looked and understood, all their data was in the cloud already. So all they were doing was replicating, spending hundreds of thousands of pounds, replicating the ability to log on, which is something that they could do without any of that. And it would have cost them pennies instead of hundreds of thousands of pounds. That is purely down to them not understanding what data they have or where it is. And the third piece to this is who uses the data. Really important yet again, So if you can understand what data you have, where it is, and how or who uses it, it really helps. It just really empowers the organization to take some control back because, lots of companies will try and protect absolutely every single part of their systems, but all you really need to do is understand the critical data. What data you have is your crown jewels. I always think if you printed the data off and left it in a car park, which of that information is the one that would really stress you out that it's in the car park for anybody to pick up? That's a great way of working it out. And that just answering those questions again, and these are completely non-technical. I don't care about firewalls. I don't care about antivirus or endpoint detection. This is purely your data. We have, we have zero data and our zero data is stored here. Then you can start asking questions. So is zero secure? am I able to back that data up? Because that's a great thing with zero, right? Can you back your data up if you're using it? Because what happens if someone was able to corrupt your data, or some zero had a catastrophic accident that meant that your data was lost? How do you restore your data? Because zero has no built-in ability to restore information. And it's the same with CRM systems. It's the same with your key environmental, applications that you use to run your organization. And that can go from outside of the finance department as well, to manufacturing, to everything. So really, really important. And then you answer, who uses the data. So who's using it, and you discover that you've got this really amazingly sensitive information, and then you've got one user using it and they're still using Windows XP, which is incredibly vulnerable, right? So all of these questions can then sort of spider out, and you understand, again, like I said, all completely non-technical. You don't need a degree in cybersecurity to be able to work all these things out. So it's really, really is empowering. And, these are the conversations you don't have to do yourself, but these are the conversations you should have with the people responsible for looking after your cyber or advising around cybersecurity. If they start throwing all these, oh, got a bit of feedback there. It's like a Jimi Hendrix concert. Sorry. Yeah, and so that's a really, really important point. Was anybody going to ask a question then, or did it just go funny? Oh, but Bob, I'll take that as a no. That's brilliant. So governance, really, really important. So what are the key things to do? Well, we see companies tend to run some form of protection, right? So companies will do one or more of these things, right? They'll have certifications, they'll be monitoring or checking for vulnerabilities, scanning for vulnerabilities. So certifications will be things like Cyber Essentials Standard, Cyber Essentials Plus, or maybe IASME or ISO 27001 and other things like that. Maybe vulnerabilities, they check their environments to make sure that their computers are patched and their firewalls are secure and all these type of things. Some more advanced and more mature organizations will provide monitoring services. So they'll actually have CCTV basically for your IT and digital systems to make sure that nothing bad is happening and that you can act in a proactive way to protect information. So get early warnings of ransomware attacks and various things like that. So monitoring, again, really important. Education. Businesses will educate their staff on user awareness and phishing and what's good, what makes a good password, and all these types of things. Again, really important stuff. Governance, I just mentioned there, probably should have been the first thing I put on this slide by here. Governance, absolutely key. Understanding what you have, where it is, and how you use it, absolutely vital. And then you can build things like disaster recovery plans, business continuity, and everything else to wrap around it. And it informs everything else. Governance and good governance will tell you whether you need monitoring or whether you need to check for vulnerabilities. And then your certifications are a sort of a checkpoint against your governance. And then, detection and response. So lots of organizations use products like Sophos and CrowdStrike and SentinelOne and things like these. They all do a job, and it is all sort of relatively important. But what we see is so many organizations, big and small, use multiple vendors to provide these services. So the huge problem that we see is these providers don't communicate. So if you're using CrowdStrike, they are never going to talk. I've never seen this as an example ever. So they are never going to talk to the guys if you use KnowBe4 for your education. They're not going to communicate. They don't care. They're not going to communicate with Darktrace if you're using Darktrace for your monitoring. And they're not going to communicate with the companies who do your vulnerabilities, likewise the certifications. So what you end up having is these Chinese walled silos, which can cause huge problems, because as soon as you have this separation of services like this, everything sort of falls through the middle. So you can be in a situation that, if you're using Darktrace for one and CrowdStrike for the other, Darktrace think, well, I've got this scope and this is what I'm looking after. CrowdStrike will think, well, I've got this scope and I'm looking after that. But unfortunately, the scoping of those exercises, which would be done by the client business, might have been slightly wrong. And everybody thinks everything's being protected, but, working on Sod's law, something in the middle that isn't protected is the thing that gets infected and causes the problems. So we see this is such a common problem within organizations. And one recent example that we had is this is mapping out an individual's mailbox. So they use Microsoft 365, and they use us for the monitoring of their Microsoft 365. So you can see all those little red dots are basically bots. So cyber criminals using bots trying to automatically log into this user's mailbox. And as I said, every red dot is a failed attempt to log into that environment. And you can see they're spread all over the world. You sort of can't pay much attention to that because cyber criminals use the dark web and VPNs and various things like that to obfuscate exactly where they are. So and to avoid blocking, it tends to just like pop over the world. This could be just one individual using one set of botnets to try and break into one mailbox, right? So it's still incredibly impressive. But what we faced was all of a sudden we had one little flash just outside in Senegal that showed us that there was a successful login to that account. Now, 99% of our clients, we are able to have an overview and a holistic approach and understanding of everything that's going on in the environment. With this, all we have is the access to their mailbox and their 365, and we're aware that a user is logged in. So at this point now, client that we work with uses a different organization to manage their PCs, a different organization to manage their Macs, a different organization to manage their mobiles. They use a different company to do their education and their awareness, and then they use a different company again to manage the antivirus at the endpoint. And for us, it was incredibly difficult to be able to diagnose this because without any additional information, we don't know whether they're on a PC, on a Mac, or a mobile. We don't, the education piece, not so important, but the endpoint piece is quite important. We've got no view of any of these things, and we have no communication lines between, us and the team on that manages the endpoint. So it causes huge problems. Is it unsurmountable? No, because in the end we get to the bottom of it. But while we're getting to the bottom of it, this could take a half an hour, this could take an hour. Whereas we're a 24/7 operation, if we've identified this at 3 o'clock on a Sunday morning, sometimes, teams B, C, D, and E are not interested at all. I just realized I got two team E's. Sorry, cut and paste for you. I do apologize. Team E for the final one should be team F. But, those delays could be absolutely fatal to that organization and could cause huge problems. It could be a ransomware attack. It could be, the fact that they were able to infiltrate that mailbox means as soon as they're in there, they could then send an email out across their chain to all of their contacts or internally within the organization that spreads far and wide. So the damage can be done incredibly quickly. Fortunately for this one, it was isolated and we were able to stop it, and that's fantastic. But those levels and those siloing of services can cause huge problems for organizations. So, as I mentioned, a holistic solution is by far the best approach. Now this can be and probably is, one solution provider that can provide visibility across the entire environment. And there can be bits, and we work in a very similar way where the client has some internal capability that can be augmented and supported by our team and so on. But that's still fine because there's lines of communication and they're open and everybody knows what's going on. So the detection and response guys, in the instance of the mailbox account, if that was with our systems, and we were able to identify a login from Senegal, we would notify that. We would know the user straight away. That would then flip to our active defense team who would understand what's going on. They would be able to view everything that's going on from there. They would be able to see what device it was, what was happening, was there any malware being put on that device, any emails, and everything else around it, so we could block and protect it. And also, that ability to patch and manage the vulnerabilities across the network as well is incredibly important, because those devices, most of the time, not always, and there are horrible things called 0 days and other things that exist out there, but most of the time, cyber criminals are looking to exploit vulnerabilities on devices. So, those really annoying things that come up on your phones and your computers saying, updates available, do you wish to do them now, or do you want to suspend it? And people do it later. You should never click on do it later, because you could be that unlucky person that those vulnerabilities that patch is applying to, you could get hit with. And the same with certifications. When you're doing certifications and you take a holistic overview of your cybersecurity, that becomes a lot less painful as well, because you haven't got to go to each vendor and each provider for them to try and support you through the certification process. You got everything in one place and everybody's all singing from the same hymn sheet. Incredibly important. So, sort of wrapping this up now, conscious that I've talked at you, and hopefully some people have got some questions. Oh, I did have another slide. Oh, see, I've got my slides the wrong way around now. There we go. I'm doing really well. So we'll bounce back. So some takeaways for you guys then. So start with governance. Whatever your company does, whatever, wherever your sector that you work in, this will always apply. And you don't have to sit and write policies, but you really have to understand what data you have, where it is, and who uses it. Absolutely life-changing, honestly. All right. Try to limit silos. You can't always remove them completely, because you may sometimes need specialist organizations to support you for specialist things, but most of the time you can really get more of the mundane and the most the daily stuff under wraps with it all. So really important. And remember, cyber isn't just an IT issue, it's compounded by IT, and that's it. And what I'll do then is go back there for the last slide. So I think that covered everything, Sophie, I think. So if anybody's got any questions.
Thanks, Damon. There is a question in the chat. Someone's put, how regularly do organizations carry out cyber wars, and how effective are they?
Cyber wars. So, right. Okay. Do you know what? Nobody's ever asked me that question.
No.
So cyber wars, I tell you, so they mean protecting against attacks, I assume. I'm assuming, rather than a war, it tends to mean they attack somebody else. So.
I don't know if so Simran asked the question. Did you want to come off mute, Simran? And oh, he's put yes, that is the question.
Yeah, sorry, that's that's the question. Like, obviously, organizations are being attacked, but how often do we actively go out there and attack someone else to really test our resilience? I mean, if that happens, and is it effective? Really, that was the question. Sorry, right. But if it's a tricky one.
No, it's not a tricky one at all. I mean, you would have to have two willing parties, so two companies to take part in that, because you can't just go out as a company and attack someone because you're breaking the Computer Misuse Act, and you can get into a lot of trouble really, really quickly. Because there was a theoretical conversation a few years back about having active defense, and as soon as you see someone attacking you, you go back and attack them. Now, that's brilliant in principle and sort of makes sense, until you realize that the cyber criminals are not that stupid that they're standing in front of you, attacking you. They're pivoting through another company. And then all of a sudden you start attacking a really innocent company that hasn't got a clue. And then you just get lots of problems. Now, we do see organizations test their ability to withstand a defense, and we do that as a company day on day for our clients, and then that can boil down to physical tests. So, testing applications and their ability to withstand an attack, all the way to tabletop exercises. And quite often the important thing is companies have the technical technical controls in place, but the management don't really understand how to use them and understand what they've got and the deficiencies and the silos and everything else. So tabletop exercises are fantastic to run as well. You know, when you get all the senior members of the team around and then go through an exercise of I don't know, a ransomware attack or something like that, which is always quite fun.
No, great. Now you've answered my question, because I work in a really large housing organization and we're
Yep.
really concerned about ransomware, you know, people's
Yep.
data and being taken. So that's our primary concern. But no, thank you for answering that. Great.
No problem. And yeah, we feel the pain. We work with quite a few housing associations as well. So yeah,
Great.
interesting. Yeah, interesting. They, you know, very difficult space for them to be as well.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a question for Damon? We're a couple of minutes to finish. Feel free to come off mute or put it in the chat.
God, did well, answered every question in a 25.
Oh, we've got Dan. Dan, did you want to come off mute?
Trying, bear with me.
Yeah, we can hear you. There we go.
I was just going to say, for anybody not taking this seriously and wondering what they can do, I've had experience of working in an organisation that's been victim of ransomware, and some of what seem like real basics with hindsight, like having clear lines of communication between IT to directors to managers, and getting the lines of communication established early so that everybody knows what's going on, everybody knows what people are telling who, everybody can flag things that are mission critical and things that can wait until this is resolved, and everybody can know what the latest view on how long it's going to take to resolve, albeit that's always a bit how long's a piece of string when you're in the middle of it. Stuff like that, that's stuff that you should have a plan for, and organisations don't, or they think they do, and then when you actually get to the point, so I guess it's road testing your disaster recovery. You know, there's no point having a disaster recovery plan that's gathering dust at the bottom of a filing cabinet. You've got to use it every now and again, test it to see if it works.
Yeah, dead right, Dan. I mean, it's exactly what you said. It's governance is key. You know, it might be the least exciting part of cybersecurity. You're talking about, you know, the work that we do. We've got the big screens on the wall, and we do what's something called red team exercises where we break into buildings, and we do all of these types of things. By far, the most important is governance, right? That bit again, sorry to repeat it, what you have, where it is, and how you use it. That allows you to build realistic and sensible disaster recovery and business continuity, and then testing it with tabletop exercises, you know, running those drills. Because I'll tell you now, the first time we ever do a tabletop exercise with a client, we sit there, they all sit there with their laptops, and we say, right, first thing, all your IT systems are down. And they're like, all right, okay. And then so get your incident response plans out. And they all go on their computers. I go, no, your computers are down, they're gone. There is no, so where's your hard copies? And they've got no hard copies, so they fail straight away. It's absolutely crazy. Nobody ever does it. And well, in fact, that's not strictly true. We're seeing more and more organizations do it. And it's so valuable, because you don't want to be the first time. And that's the thing with cybersecurity, and Dan mentioned really, the first time that, you know, you don't want to be thinking about it the first time when it happens, right? So you get ransomware, you get a ransomware attack. You don't want to think, right, what are we going to do about this? You want to have thought about it already. Trust me, if you want to get through it.
It's interesting you say about hard copy of your incident response plan, because thinking now post-COVID, I've got one in my office, but I haven't got one here when I'm working from home. So
well, yeah, exactly.
I mean, you know, I could drive to the office if I needed it, but it's just another thing to think about now that working practices have changed.
Exactly, yeah, and that's right. And we see, I mean, we deal with some organizations, and we're ISO 27001, and they're thinking, oh, we got to look at it again. And you look at them, and they've moved offices twice in the time since I really don't think your ISO 27001 is up to scratch there. You've literally moved your systems and everything twice. So it is so important. And, you know, COVID and as you said, Dan, changed how everything works really these days.
No more questions in the chat. Obviously, we're over time. So any final questions for Damon? You've answered everyone.
They said it was impossible. I can share the present.
Yeah, that'd be perfect. If you can share the presentation, I will circulate that around. I've also put in the chat just the Pure Cyber ACCA resource hub for our members. So if everyone wants to have a look at that, there's all different kind of things in there. But yeah, really interesting session, Damon. So thank you so much. And yeah, as I said, we'll circulate the presentation and a few more interesting links as well for people. But yeah, thank you so much, and have a lovely day, rest of the afternoon.
Take care. Bye bye. Thanks everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
See you later.